Welcome to the Amazing Truth Podcast, a podcast where we focus on real issues and have real talk, and as always, provide a biblical perspective. We hope that you will be blessed as you listen.
Welcome to the Amazing Truth Podcast. This is the Amazing Truth Minute.
This is the Amazing Truth Podcast. The Amazing Truth Podcast. Listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and Stitcher. Like us on Facebook at the Amazing Truth Podcast. The Amazing Truth Podcast. Real issues, real talk.
For the Amazing Truth Minute today, we'll focus on Psalms 145 and verse 5. And it says, I will meditate on the glorious splendor of your majesty and on your wondrous works. See, friends, our thought life is important. So it's not surprising that the Bible has a lot to say about managing our minds. For better or worse, the things we think about influence our lives. Our minds are seldom quiet. We are always thinking about something. The good news is we have the ability to choose what we dwell on. King David resolved that he would think about or meditate on the Lord's majesty and wondrous works. See, friends, to meditate on something means to turn it over and over in our mind, contemplating the topic from several different angles. Practically speaking, if we know how to worry, we already know how to meditate. But unlike worry, meditation has the potential to direct our thoughts onto the positive aspects of God's nature and power. When we meditate on all the ways God has worked on our behalf, it will stir our faith and increase our confidence that He will come through for us in the future. And that is the Amazing Truth Minute.
This is the Amazing Truth Podcast. The Amazing Truth Podcast. Listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and Stitcher. Like us on Facebook at the Amazing Truth Podcast. The Amazing Truth Podcast. Real issues, real talk.
All right. Welcome back, our listeners, our viewers. It's fortunate that you're joining us, but it's unfortunate that I'm getting to sit with Kenan again. But why not? Why not? Kenan, it's good to see you.
Good to see you. That is, you see, that's your way of saying you enjoy this.
I enjoy this. You think so?
I know so.
Don't tempt me to go there because I enjoy more.
Let's focus on the podcast.
Let's focus on what brought us here today. Right?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, listeners. But it's always a joy to be back, Kenan, and just to have these mics and just share our hearts and our stories.
Yeah.
The one thing that we miss is the fact that we used to unveil our guests.
Yeah.
With video now we just get to see them. But today we are graced with a special person.
Hey, that's right.
Jesus, I've known her for so long.
Okay.
But we lost touch, so I'm excited to connect again,
Good.
right?
Yeah.
And so today we are graced with our sister. I'm not gonna say her name because I want to save the best for her.
Yeah.
And this topic, why are you looking forward to it, Kenan? Before we bring our guest,
I'm looking forward. Which topic? What is the topic?
that's the reason I started laughing. Why are you looking forward?
I'm excited because I think, as you've said in the last 3 podcasts, we've said it's us researching, it's us studying, it's us learning. Mm-hmm. So this time we say we are not going to read. We'll bring a live teacher to teach us.
To teach us, right? And listen, as viewers, if I'm you, I'm not moving. I'm not moving because today we're about to touch on some serious issues. When you look at statistics, you hear things about deaths that happen in the hospitals, especially during maternal health and things like those. If you think about the world we're living in, raising children can be tricky, can be hard. When you think about society as a whole, man, it's just a messed up society we live in. Gun violence, kids with guns. And so our guest today will be tackling how she's navigating that realm of parenting, but before then she will tell us how she got to that journey. And not only that, her own experience that is powerful. People can argue with your theology, your knowledge, but they can't argue with their experience.
That's true.
And so there's a beautiful experience of maternal health, homeschooling, and all these where Kenan and I have no expertise on. So we're here.
One thing I have expertise on is researching.
Do you call yourself a researcher?
No, I'm a Googler.
Okay, that's what I thought. Citation.
I think we should just, before we
frame the statistics, and then we bring
just from the statistics. So one of the topics we'll talk about is maternal mental health.
Yes.
And homeschooling.
Yes.
No, but we'll focus more on the journey and then build into that. But some quick facts about maternal mental health. Less than 15% of women diagnosed with a maternal mental health disorder receive treatment. With increased demand and barriers to mental health because of the pandemic. This is 2020.
Post-pandemic.
1 in 5 women on average suffer from maternal mental health disorders. 1 in 5 women on average suffer from maternal mental health disorder. Up to 50% of women living in poverty will suffer from maternal mental health disorder. So just Google that for you to get that. There's a lot of different ailments, different what these women focus, and mostly women of color suffer most. It's harder for them to get resources and seek help for that. So this is exciting, Ezra.
Thank you so much for your wisdom and knowledge of Googling.
Yes.
So we now come to the real experience. So we want to introduce our guest here. Just tell us your name. Tell us why you're passionate about this. What made you want to just share your story? And then after that, we'll start back and pause, rewind, and get to know you a little bit. So just say your name and why you chose to be here today, and why these two topics that you are going to be walking us through this journey you're passionate about them. So that in case anybody misses, they will have taken something away.
Well, I am excited to be here to share my story, to share my journey. But I think for two different reasons. Sharing my maternal mental health journey, I think the thing that excites me or motivated me to do that first is because it's something that I haven't shared in the past. But it's something that I know a lot of women around me have experienced, a lot of mothers, a lot of parents around me. And it's something that I feel like needs to be talked about, and something that I also need to share just as part of my journey as well, because you never know who's in the same shoes and who needs to know that they're not alone. At the same time, when it comes to homeschooling, in the recent past, I've had a few people come up to me and ask me why I haven't shared on that, or why, just people curious about our journey or reasons into homeschooling. So for two different reasons, just that it's something that, first of all, even for myself, I don't think I've run into a lot of people in our community that do homeschool that look like us. And it could be that there's people out there that do it, but they also maybe might be assuming that there's not a lot of other people that do it. So just also sharing that to help build community around homeschooling, to help share information to anyone that might be curious about it. So those are the main reasons that I wanted to share.
Ezra,
yes.
When the pandemic hit, I homeschooled.
I already knew where you were going with that.
It was not fun.
I'm glad your kids survived. I'm glad that they survived.
And the reason I'm saying this is, once we talk about all this, is it's not for, some things are not for everybody.
Yes.
Right? But if you feel you resonate with it, reach out and do your research. But for me, I think I probably do it.
You don't want to lose your kids. But you see, that's the beauty about this.
Yeah.
Maybe you didn't have that support system of how to do it. Maybe you didn't have the resources how to do it. So maybe with the right, resources and support and education, then it might be something that you might do and excel. The excel is a stretch, but mostly you do excel, right? So, but the viewers, man, we're excited about this. Our guest forgot to say one thing, and that was her name.
Goodness.
Her name is
my name is Nancy.
Yes, and
Kinara Nyabuti. I changed my name. A lot of people know me as Nancy Kinara, but I go by Nancy Nyabuti.
Nancy is a mother of how many?
I am a mother of 4. Should I say their ages?
It's up to you. It's your story.
I am a mother of 4. I have 3 boys, 16, 8, almost 6, and a 2-year-old girl.
16, 8,
6.
6 and 2 years. That's teenage.
I have every stage. I have
flavor
a
of
teen.
it. Wow.
Everything. We
You
have
know.
everything. We
Ah,
have
wow,
a teen, a preteen, a graduating toddler, and a new toddler.
See how she makes it sound nice?
I know, right?
I think one of the beauty of this podcast today is we have a female voice that is going to put sense into us as we go through this conversation. So we appreciate you, Nancy, and we're definitely excited, honestly, to hear your journey. So before we get to meet your lovely family and the lovely journey of homeschooling and maternal mental health journey, tell us a little bit about who's Nancy. Where was Nancy born, and how was it growing up for you?
I was born in Kisii, Kenya. I grew up most of my childhood into my early teenage years I spent in Kisii. And then we relocated when I was about 14, either 14, 15, and moved. My dad was already in Minnesota, so we moved to Minnesota. I want to say typical immigrant journey, but I know it's not typical for everybody.
Yeah, that's right.
But my dad was already here. My mom got a green card, and so we were able to move. 3 of my siblings moved. 2 of my older siblings stayed back home because they were over the age of 21. And so we moved here, joined my dad. That was a transition. I don't know how much of it we want to go into it. But just the age that we moved here was, I was a newly teen. So it was such a weird and interesting stage to move because I was in the process of just growing and discovering myself. And so moving to a whole new place, to a whole new school, we moved into Arden Hills. Back in the day, it wasn't as diverse as it might be right now. There was 2 of us, I think 2 Black students. One was Ghanaian and me in the school. So it was interesting. A lot of loneliness, a lot of isolation, a lot of just questioning where I belong, trying to figure a lot of things out while still growing and going through, the hormones of growing, of being an adolescent and being a teenager. My parents, again, I want to say typical story. My parents were busy working, immigrants. They had other kids back home who were in college, and they had us here, so trying their best to work and provide for everybody. So there was I spent a lot of time by myself. My older siblings were also working, so I was home alone most of the time. Just a lot of, I remember that season of my life just being very lonely. But again, very reflective, because I had a lot of quiet time to reflect. And then I ended up graduating from Mounds View High School. During the time that I was there, I was able to get connected to what do you call it? PSEO. That's a whole topic in itself. Just the challenges in just advocating for myself academically.
For the sake of Kenan, what's PSEO?
What's PSEO?
So thank you very much. What is PSEO?
PSEO is
PSEO.
So that's post-secondary education. I don't know what the O stands for, honestly, and I don't know if that's the right way, but essentially it's where you can do high school, college credits while in high school.
I never did that.
That's why I asked.
So question, you said you've mentioned loneliness. But what did you expect aside from the loneliness? What did you expect in terms of
I think we all do when we leave home. We expect to come to this place that's almost like heaven on earth in a sense. It's like, it's the States, it's the land of opportunity. It's you get to be yourself. I think even the acceptance piece, I don't know if it's even talked about, but we come here expecting that's, naturally we're going to be accepted. And it was the opposite of that. It was very much, it's like, well, I couldn't find a space where I fit in. I think the first conversation actually that my dad had with us, with all the three of us, my siblings and I, when we landed, was just on how we needed to, almost like the reality of this, what it's like to live here. And what he essentially said was, you just need to focus on your education. You need to pretty much block out the entire world and just focus on your academics and just don't get in trouble. All the right things. But I think being at that age, it's like, well, we came here expecting to just be ourselves. And so it was very... Yeah, I think the expectation and the reality definitely didn't match. And now my son is 16, so having a teen, I can see how, because it's such a tricky age to navigate all those changes, and I definitely do remember that being very tricky.
So walk us back a little bit. During this time of transition, there's loneliness. Are you naturally an introvert or extrovert?
Oh goodness, I would say naturally I'm an introvert.
Okay, so what does your support system look like? Like, how do you navigate that phase of life as a teenager? There's a young person who's probably going through that journey right now. There's a parent who's listening to these and they have a child who's navigating that. When you think back in retrospect, what do you tell the younger Nancy yourself at 16, at 14, and you're dealing with that loneliness? How did you navigate that?
That's a really good question. I don't know if I navigated it in the most healthy way. I guess I could have gone to my parents. I could have expressed that I was lonely. But again, being an immigrant, a child of immigrants, you see how much your parents are struggling to provide, to meet the basic needs. And I think emotions and feelings almost become secondary to to basic needs. It's like, they already have a lot on their shoulders. And so I didn't always lean on them or express what I was feeling or what I was going through. I did try to reach out to my school counselor, who connected me to another, it was the only Black teacher that was at the school. And I want to say that was it was something that I needed. It was a support system around school that I needed. Because oftentimes there were times that I would just, gosh, if my son listens to this episode, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble because we're going through this, skipping class. There were times, but for good reason. There were times that I would just sit in the bathroom because I didn't want to go into the classroom and feel out of place and feel it was a lonely and difficult time. But having that teacher and that support system in the school provided a space where I could go. Me and the other Black students who were there, we could go into his office. We could connect with each other and share. It was almost like we started building a support system with each other. And he offered that space to us. I'm not saying that it was probably I missed a lot of classes and it came back to bite me. I had to take some detention hours to make up for the classes. But I feel like looking back, I would say I would honestly give myself grace for it. I would say that's what I needed at that time for my mental health. And I missed some classes, but I think I really, that support system was important as well, to feel like I had other people around me.
And it sounds like, I think at 14, you're navigating a whole new country, a whole new culture, a whole new school system. First of all, you don't see people that look like you. and then the acceptance piece. Because as a person, especially as a child growing up, when my son goes and meets friends, the first thing thing that comes to their mind is, am I going to be accepted? Will they play with me? Will they do this with it? So naturally, as immigrants, we want to fit in. But what I think I'm trying to realize now is and I'm teaching people that, I'm teaching my own kids that, is that you don't have to be the one trying to fit in. You're at the end of the spectrum. You also have this personality that people need to, I don't know. That's the thing. It's a very difficult concept to explain or even to people to understand, because first of all, you're a minority, and then you're a black boy or a black girl. So getting that acceptance, I think that's, if you can't navigate, sorry to say that, some people haven't navigated that acceptance piece very well, and they're going into other things that are not healthy. So yeah, it's. I understand. I can imagine how you feel, how that was back then.
And I think as a girl too, I know as a black boy, it probably is different from. I think as a black girl, there's also a self-esteem aspect. Because you're coming into. In my situation, it's a lot of girls did not look like me or dress like me. And so there's, again, a lot of, I don't remember ever questioning my hair, my skin color, my body type in Kenya. But I know I questioned those things once I was here. Then you start to even question, what is beauty? What is the standard of beauty? Do I meet those standards of beauty? And, so there's a lot of questioning and just trying to find, again, that space where you belong. And I know now, I think the diversity in most schools is better than it was when I was here. I hope.
I mean, I want to believe it's better than
it's better than back then, for sure.
So I'm listening to these and there's a young man out there who's navigating this phase. Just be hopeful and find the support system. For you, it was a teacher. For you, it may be something else. But also parents who might be listening to this, understanding that phase is also critical. Just to be present and be able to monitor the emotions, the behaviors, the changes, and have those conversations. Now, that's a podcast by it.
Just to add, but as parents, as she mentioned that parents, when she came here, this was education, focus on this. It's always good for parents also to listen to what the kids want, and just to hear them.
And I think the emotional aspect for parents, again, like you said, Ezra, I think for parents to be available to even keep an eye on, you can notice changes in kids if you pay attention.
Very interesting topic, because we haven't even moved for past 14, and so now you're in high school. Academically, you get yourself to PSEO, which is start taking college credits when you're in high school. How does the journey proceed?
And that journey was interesting, and thank God for my dad. I was coming from Kenya. I think academically the system in Kenya it's very challenging. It's not in a bad way. It's you're a little bit ahead. So when I came here, I was at least a grade ahead. So when I did most of the tests, I was able to test out of a lot of things. But then, for whatever reason, my counselor, when we transferred my credits from when I was back home, she gave me almost like a satisfactory grade, like almost like a 2.0 instead of what I had was straight A's. And I remember my dad, because this essentially was going to affect my college application, because my cumulative GPA was going to be affected. And I remember my dad was furious, and he came in and talked to her and advocated for me. And that's what kind of led to this door for PSEO opening up, because then she was like, I guess, we can transfer the credits. And once they transferred the credits, I'd actually met my graduation requirements as a junior. And so that, again, so there's a whole layer there of, the advocacy piece for parents and, and just doors that kids might not necessarily even know that they have access to. But that opened that door. So I was able to take college credits since I'd already been done with my high school credits. And so I was in college at least a year early. And I ended up getting into the U of M. Decided to, I don't know if decided is the right word. I was told I had to major in medicine.
Okay. It's usually decided. The question is by who?
Decided.
By who?
So I kind of, I'd always been told that I would be a really good doctor. So that's what I pursued going into my undergraduate. But this time too, there's again probably another story for another day. But going into college, while I was getting accepted into college, I was already pregnant with my son, my oldest. So I was essentially, I was still in my teens, late teens, 17 going. No, actually, almost 18. Going into, so I'm getting my acceptance into college, found out that I was pregnant. My parents didn't know at that time, so I still proceeded to doing my orientation, everything that I needed to prep for going into college. And there's again,
I'm just picturing that phase of life, man. I'm just picturing that.
So I'm navigating a lot at this point. And again, that ties back into even me being a teen mom, I think has a lot to do with, again, that loneliness piece and maybe coping and having a support system, again, that wasn't necessarily the healthiest, or finding a support system that wasn't necessarily the healthiest. So I started my freshman year extremely pregnant with my son. And it was a really, really tough season of my life. Just not being extremely young. I wasn't prepared to be a parent, essentially being a single parent, being a student, being a freshman. And I did, at the U of M, I was able to find a really good support system for student parents. Okay. They have a student parent group there that really helped just hold my hand and walk me through that first year of transitioning into college as a young mom, as a teen mom, as a single mom. And I had my family support as well. But it's still... It was a hard season. It was not
no matter how,
an easy season for sure.
I think just being a mom is hard.
Yeah,
period.
that's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
But when you start talking about teen mom, single mom, African, stigma, college, wow.
I'd like to state that the stigma part was probably the hardest. I think for me that was the hardest piece, being part of a small community where how you're perceived is really important, not just to other people but to your family, to your parents. A lot of your character is perceived as people perceive that as what they see is who you are essentially. And so here I was, a teen mom, and that's all I was Nancy, the teen mom, pretty much. And that was, I think that was the hardest part of my journey. Because my son was a blessing. As young as I was, he kept me, in a way, he kept me grounded. Being a young mom at that age and being in college, my priorities had to shift really quickly. So in hindsight, it's like, he did help me stay grounded in the sense that I was able to, I knew that I had to focus solely on school and finish school and not get distracted by a lot of things. But that also meant that I was going from isolation in high school to being isolated in college. And just never really finding that place again where I belong. Because now in college, I'm not just an immigrant. You know, there's that diversity piece. It's like now there's other Somali students, there's other Kenyan students, but then the parent student. Again, that piece came kind of full circle. And that's where I feel like my mental health, my maternal mental health, really, I started to really struggle. I remember I had my son, I gave birth to my son on a Friday. I stayed in school the whole time. That Friday, I attended class, went into labor, gave birth to him, and I had finals on Monday and Tuesday.
Wow.
So I did show up for my finals.
My goodness.
With
brother, with a cold, you don't even go to class. We gotta be serious with life.
Oh, man.
All right.
So I showed up for my finals with a 2-day-old baby.
My goodness.
Wow.
And yeah, I think that kind of sums up my.
And that's freshman year.
That's freshman year. Finishing freshman year.
Ezra, before I think just to recap, some of the themes I think we've had as we sat on these chairs was you know that the acceptance, identity,
loneliness. You know,
that's I think it's transitioning.
Our friend Saya talks about transitional coaching, like he does about these. Some of the things are very very identical themes, but very different realities in terms of the support the guests were getting and all that. So I think it was a blessing that you had that support system behind you. So because I think it would have been different. We've had guests here who have gone through similar struggles, but they didn't have the support system. And when you hear their journey, not to say that yours is any different, but you know, you also you see maybe if they would have had just one person. I'm still blown away.
And still Nancy's journey would still have been hard.
Yes.
It was hard.
We're not
we're not discounting that but you still but it's
The
just
support
I mean the themes for
the themes we've had from
those are the things that the stigma was another.
Stigma is another one.
So
anybody who has sat here with that struggling, chemical dependency, substance abuse, mental health, suicidal thoughts, international student, whatnot, like these are things, identity, stigma, transitions, all those come into play.
And that's why, as I know you have very important points, but and that's why we have you sitting here, because someone can relate to that
story
and say, okay, I relate to that, I can resonate with that. Okay, now what was my support? And they can start that introspection of that and see if they can find help if they need to do so.
So Nancy, I want to come back because it's your story, man.
Oh yeah, it's never about us.
It's never about, but sometimes we forget. Now, let me ask this.
Yeah.
As a teen mom, there's a mom right now who's listening to your story. What would you tell her?
What would I tell her?
Yeah. Just a freshman year, that pregnancy phase, that like just talk to the younger self.
I would say it gets really hard, but it also gets better. It gets beautiful. It gets the seasons will change, but the growth, I don't think anyone can take that from you. The growth of just growing yourself and growing alongside your child, and just looking back on your own journey and your ability to just walk through that and be able to build this thing, grow this child and bring this child to life. I mean, that's God, but also be able to navigate everything that comes with. If we're talking to a single mom, a teen mom, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of uncertainty. I remember thinking, I don't have a job. I'm a student. You don't have the luxury to even think about the future, to think about what your child, about their schooling, about what they're gonna eat, all of those things. And in the moment, those things can seem overwhelming. But big picture, they're very little things that you get to overcome, but they make you better, they make you stronger, they make you more resilient to other things that you'll encounter in life. So I would say hang in there, find a support system. And that could be, there's so many people out there that are willing to help. I think sometimes fear against stigma keeps us from seeking out the help.
Talk to the community. The stigma, because we talked about this. Talk to the community. Somebody like Kenan and I who might judge someone.
Yeah.
Like, what would you tell us?
I would say, just don't judge. Don't judge. You don't know that person's story. You don't know how they came to be in that place. You don't know how. Just walk with them, walk by them, pray for them, pray with them. Don't use them as an example of what not to be. I would say, just don't judge. Don't judge. You don't know unless you're in someone's story. You really don't know. And in this life, being a woman, you don't know how that child came to be, how that person came to be in that situation. If it was consensual, if it wasn't, there's a lot of things that people don't know. And so I would say to the community, just show up for that person, because I think that's when you need community. That's what community is for. It's not for the celebrations. It's not for the graduations only. It's for the hard times. It's that's when you need people around you to rally behind you. And
powerful, man. That's powerful. One more question, then we proceed. You talked about loneliness, and you talked about high school loneliness, and I heard you say that potentially maybe this loneliness also led to the early teen pregnancy, and you carried on to college. Do you think if you would have dealt with, or somehow, I don't know, not you, but if that would have been addressed, the journey changes? Or rather, let me not ask that. I'm framing this question. Let me just make a point and then we continue. So the point that I'm making is that when you know you have a struggle, find ways to get that help. I'm not saying that's what led to that, but for you, luckily it's a child, somebody else will commit suicide. Because if they don't find that support system, because that is something that is actually bothering them. So anyhow, so you go to labor on Friday, finals Monday, Tuesday. Walk us from there. How is that journey like?
That journey is.
Did you pass those exams?
I did. I was on the honors. No, I'll say this, and I'm not saying it with pride. I was on the honors list my freshman year. I remember my dad getting it in the mail and calling me and saying, "Hey, this came in the mail, and you're on the honors list. You literally made straight A's."
Ezra cannot relate.
But I will say, I don't say that with pride, because what led to that was I was sacrificing myself for the grades. I was sacrificing myself to prove a point to the people around me, to the community, to myself, because for the longest time, all I'd had was, you're going to ruin your life. Your life is ruined. You are ruined. You will have a hard life. You will not finish school. You will not, you'll never get married. All these voices that were constantly around me and now in my head. And I think I wanted to prove that I wasn't any of those things to myself and to the people around me, but it came to my own detriment. And after that semester, after that year, then I feel like I hit rock bottom in a sense. I remember walking, and I said this to my counselor that I saw that day. I remember walking through campus and just thinking, man, if my son was home at this time, because I was in school, but I remember I was like, if I just had my son and somehow this earth beneath me opened up and literally swallowed me, there would have been nothing more peaceful than that. Just because I was extremely depressed. I was overwhelmed. I was again lonely, extremely lonely. I didn't, as much as I had the support system financially through the college and the guidance with my counselors, I did not have the emotional support system that I needed. I didn't have anyone telling me that I was doing an okay job or that I was going to be okay. So I was struggling. I was alone. I was in a lot of emotional pain. But the hardest part too was going through that as a mother. I honestly, and I hate to say this, but I believe if I didn't have my son, there's a likelihood that I wouldn't be here today if I went through that similar pain. But because I had him, he kept me alive, essentially. I stayed alive for him. But it was also the hardest thing to do in the same, when everything in you doesn't want, it's you're so lonely, you're so tired. I think tired is the word. You're so tired emotionally and mentally that you have nothing to keep you going, but you still have to keep going. I think that's, for me, that was my rock bottom. And I'm eternally grateful for my son because he did keep me. It was like the lifeline that I needed to hold on to. And I would go home and I would hold him. I'm sorry, I get emotional, but yeah. I remember talking to him, and he essentially became my therapist because buddy, we're gonna make it. We'll make it. We'll do this. And he was that lifeline that I needed to get through that. And I think I always had a good idea of my emotions and where I was mentally with my mental health, and I could sense that I was not in a good place. And so I reached out to my school counselor, who referred me to a mental health therapist at school. And I was able to see, it was a Black lady, she was older, and she essentially became like a second mom to me. And she was a Christian, so she offered that spiritual perspective and just that support system that I needed. And so I was able to see her at least twice a week during this time, and slowly I started to get more grounded and just find strength somehow. And I believe it was also tied to just postpartum depression, because I've gone through it with my other kids. And so that part, I think just over time as my son got older and I had that support system, that mental health care, I was able to get better and find ways to cope. And I was able to finish my bachelor's and graduated. And then went on to get my master's in.
I gotta celebrate this. Celebrate this, right? That's how we celebrate. We don't clap hands.
I went on to get my master's in similar field, mental health counseling, through St. Mary's University. Yeah.
Nice. You're licensed.
I am not licensed yet. That comes
we'll
back.
Work on that.
We'll work on the licensing piece. But I did finish. I did practice for a few years as well. Yeah.
And there's a lot of celebration.
Yeah, I feel like she's just skimming through this.
I know, we can't rush it. We can't rush it. She just finished college and masters. We're not even that. But Kenan, what is hitting you home?
What's hitting me is, again, it's just that walk. She's walking alone. She's finding this strength within herself somehow to, even with suicidal thoughts and ideations, she's pushing through. There's that strength she's finding in her son. And again, we always say, find that thing that resonates, that strength, that thing that makes you wake up in the morning. For you, it was your son. What is it for you? Find it and just push through it, and there's light at the end of the tunnel. But we still have to do the work. I mean, she had to find a therapist.
Yes.
She had to talk to someone. She had to open up and be vulnerable to someone. And just those are the steps, we need. That's all I can hear. It's beautiful, Nancy. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I just want to echo what you said. I think when you said you found a therapist and you started seeing one, especially immigrants, people of color, these are things that we die inside by ourselves. We don't go outsourcing and seeking for those resources out there. So it's a beautiful thing just to know that you in college, those resources are out there, like in your campus, find.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be a teen mom. It could be you're struggling with your classes. It could be you're struggling with acceptance. You could be you're struggling with your values, your faith, whatever it is you're struggling with. Don't struggle by yourself. Nancy was able to get that help and be grounded and through that. So so that we don't rush these, Nancy.
Yeah.
Any moment because that was freshman year, you grad. Any moment within this college phase that you're like, that moment stands out, now as a mom and all that. Like how is social life? You're a mom. How is classes? How is these 3-4 years you're still in college? And by the way, I know what you did for graduate studies because you said, but I don't know what you ended up doing, biology or pre-med or something.
Pre-med, yeah. Okay. So that definitely does stand out. I continued on the pre-med track, but I was also doing a lot of psychology and more social work classes at the same time, because truthfully that's where my passion was in mental health. And so as I continued on the pre-med track, I ended up being selected into this program that was a pilot program by the U of M Medical School and the Mayo Medical School that was called Minnesota Future Doctors. And they selected first-generation college students to be part of the pilot program. And we spent 3 summers going to just shadowing doctors and shadowing students through the medical school. It was, again, those 3 years was a lot of trying to juggle parenting, trying to juggle school. Again, pre-med track is a lot of studying, a lot of tests, a lot of physics and biology and chemistry. So it was stressful. It was a very stressful 3 years. But again, my parents were very supportive as far as it comes to my son. They were always available to watch him. And so I felt, as far as my son was concerned, his dad and my parents were always there to help, which helped a lot. And as I was on this track for pre-med, we ended up, our last year was a Mayo clinic where we shadowed, again, the big fancy Mayo. It was very fancy, very overwhelming. And the intention of this program was to kind of prep students, and especially minority students, to be really good applicants into medical school, to be able to have the internship aspect, to have the experience behind them of shadowing doctors, almost like build a resume to get into medical school, mentorship. But I feel like for me, it did the opposite. Which was also a good thing. I don't know if they intended for that to be the effect as well. While some of the other students became more passionate about pursuing medicine, I became less passionate about it, especially being a Mayo, and as it's first-class medicine, it's the best place to go for a lot of people. But I didn't find, I saw a big disconnect between the doctors and the patient care there. And so for me, that wasn't something, it was very clinical, it was very impersonal, the way the doctors related to the patients. And it could be that that's just who I happen to shadow. But it really spoke to me as far as what the field would look like, what life would look like as a doctor. And again, I'm coming into this as a single mom. I have my son at home. And so it got me thinking about just, do I really want to put in all that time away from my son? The next 4 years of medicine, another 3 years of residency. And at this time, I was already taking a lot of time from my son, being away from him to just finish school. So I ended up deciding that that's not something I wanted to pursue. Which...
I'm curious to hear how that landed with community, family,
and
everything. You know,
family. Yeah, probably. I want to say, yeah, my dad wasn't too happy. He really wasn't. I think that's where he saw me. That's what he saw me becoming. And it was hard for him to reconcile with the fact that he felt like I was essentially throwing away an opportunity. And for me, I think at that point, I'd had probably enough therapy, enough time to really sit and really think about what was important to me. And my son was important to me, more important to me than anything I would pursue. And yeah, I wanted to be able to provide for him. But I also knew that taking time away from him in that important stage in his life wasn't. It was something that I was going to regret.
So we can safely assume your dad was, he accepted that.
He accepted it. He did accept it. He came to accept it. Yeah.
And I'm asking that question lightly, but I think there's some parents who wouldn't. And we've had stories of kids who've been, disfellowship, whatever.
Disowned.
Whatever, that's the one. Because of our because of career choice, our parents see us as this, and they want you to be this.
Yeah.
But then there's that push for ourselves to be whoever we want to be.
Yeah. So I see what time is rolling. In all fairness, let me defend the parents, but I think because they are parents, they want the best for us. They want the best for us, right? But I also want to come back because we are broke. We don't want to be sued. I say this. I think perhaps the program that you entered, that was the goal, is for you to see the life,
right? The real life,
be able to choose if this is what works for you and somebody else works for them. But also realizing that most of us go to fields because we've never been exposed to them and we're not able to make decisions the right way. So these programs are there. Which, in that note, I will ask you to repeat the program for anyone thinking of med school. It may work for them as a resource for them, right? Like, so that they can choose. Mayo is a prestigious good place for anyone to be in med school.
I may want to be a doctor. Experience.
Let's focus on the person. So what is the name of the program for someone? And then we will wind up on this note because we need to build on part 2. I'm going to give a resource for single mothers briefly, and then we'll wind up.
The program, I believe it's still running. It's called Minnesota Future Doctors. That's what they called it when I was there. Yeah.
All right. So if you're in medical school, you're thinking of going to medical school, you're not certain about that's a program, check it out. We want also to give resources in our podcast. Also, one thing as we wrap up, part 1, viewers, listeners, this is part 1. If I were you, I wouldn't move for part 2. Why would you? Because we haven't even touched in this whole journey and how it goes. But there's a program where I work called the Jeremiah program. What Jeremiah program offers is support for single moms who want to go to college. And provide college support. They will give you a coach who works with you twice a month to meet with you, set up the plans. They will, if you need housing, they work with you to get housing. They have some residential apartments that you can, if you qualify in those programs, you get into those programs. You only pay 30% of your rent, and you do what else? They provide childcare support so that you can be able to go to school. So any single mom out there, just like Nancy, you might not have a support system like Nancy did, and you're looking searching for somewhere, just check it out, the Jeremiah program, and we're nationwide: Rochester, Minnesota, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Boston, New York, everywhere else. I'm pitching for my workplace. I'm excited, man. So, but with that being done and said, there's a song that's written by some Kenyan artists. They call themselves S08E3 Soul, and one thing they say is that child who's born maybe end up being the next Obama, may end up being the next, Mandela. They may end up being the next who. So we're happy for the journey so far, but we're curious to learn how you navigated that. That is our time for this episode. We are coming back with part 2, where Nancy walks us through the next level of her journey. How does she navigate motherhood? She ends up doing homeschooling. How did she learn to do that? But more so, we're going to hone on a little bit on this mental health and maternal mental health and learn more about it. If I were you again, I will not move, but tune in for the next one. That has been our time here at Amazing Truth Podcast. See you on the next one.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Amazing Truth Podcast. We hope you were blessed as you listened. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. God bless you, and see you on the next one.